Hello and welcome to the next episode of Let's Talk Brand, the first in Poland series of video interviews with world-class branding experts. It's been a while since the last conversation with Rob Meyerson and David Acker, but I just needed a break. But now I'm back and I'm excited. Actually, I'm always excited because I have the privilege of talking to some of the best branding experts in the world, and I'm always super honored to do this. And today, I'm honored to interview the author of the best-selling book, What Great Brands Do, the 7 brand building principles that separate the best from the rest, and the new book, Fusion, How Integrating Brand and Culture Powers the World's Greatest Companies. I hope you will enjoy listening to my conversation with Denise Lee Yohn, because she focuses on something extremely important for the brand, which is culture. And I do hope that in this episode, you will learn how to integrate brand and culture and why culture is so important. Hello, Denise. Welcome to the podcast, and actually welcome to Poland.
I'm so excited to be talking with you. Thank you so much, Lucas. This is great.
Denise, I like to ask at the beginning if you have ever been to Poland or have you worked for the company based in Poland? And I'm asking this because sometimes it turns out that the expert worked in Poland like Brenda Benz or has Polish roots like Richard Czerniawski, who also remembers some Polish words from his childhood, or was almost in Poland, but due to the storm, the ship turned back, as in the case of Marcus Niemeyer, business partner, and the star. So how about you?
Oh, no, I wish I have, but no, I have only done very limited work in Europe in general. So this is a first for me.
Okay, wonderful. So we open this market for you.
Yes.
Okay. One of the idea behind this podcast or videocast, however you call this, is the presentation of the best experts so that the Polish entrepreneurs and the marketers and students as well know where to look for inspiration. So if you could tell us what is your professional background, and if you could tell us about your shift from your corporate work to consulting.
Sure. So my last corporate role was with Sony Electronics. I left that company in 2004. So I've been an independent for almost 20 years now, going on 20 years soon. But I was heading up brand and strategy at Sony. And that was really kind of my dream job. And it was really the culmination of all of the experience that I had had up to that point. When I graduated from university, I first worked in consumer research. So I learned all about how to figure out how consumers made decisions, how to do research, how to analyze the findings. And then I moved into a product manager role where I was responsible for introducing new products for a fast food restaurant. And so I got to learn about product marketing and product development. And then I moved to actually a couple of advertising agencies where I really learned the discipline of creative communications and how brands communicate and connect with their customers. And the opportunity at Sony really combined all three of those, the research and analysis, the product marketing, and the communications into this great role. And for the first few years while I was at Sony, I worked less on kind of the external brand building and more on the internal brand alignment and engagement. The CEO and the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at the time, really felt like we needed to ensure that everyone inside the organization was aligned with our brand vision. So worked on that. And then after several years, just decided my time at Sony was over. So I resigned and started my own business. And I first started doing quite a bit of consulting, taking the tools and practices that I had learned at Sony to other clients. Over time, I've done less and less consulting and more speaking. So now primarily I'm a keynote speaker, and I speak on a range of brand leadership topics, but they are all within that context of brand building and brand leadership.
Okay, so even it was your dream job, you felt like this is the time to share your knowledge and experience with people.
Yeah, it's kind of a long story. The short version is there was a lot of leadership turnover at Sony, and in the 5 years I was at the company, I had 5 different bosses and 3 different presidents of the company. And so amidst all that turnover, what I was hired for no longer was as important. And so I decided, yes, that I would take all of this knowledge and insights that I had gained and share them with a broader audience.
And I'm not sure if it's a true story, but what I see you focus on culture. So that's the topic.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I've always, as I said, when I worked at Sony, we were much more interested in how do the people inside the organization understand our brand. So I got exposed to culture building in that role. And the more that I worked on brand building, in my consulting work, the more I came to realize how critical culture building is, and specifically aligning culture and brand. And so that's why I wrote my book, Fusion, How Integrating Brand and Culture Powers the World's Greatest Companies, and why these days most of the speaking I do is on culture and leadership and purpose and values and topics like that.
Okay, we'll come to this.
Yes.
But as the name of the podcast is Let's Talk Brand,
Yes.
I like to ask, what is so my idea also is to simplify all these complicated theories. So I sometimes at the very beginning I ask for the definitions.
Yes.
And I would like to ask you about your 2 definitions. What is your definition of brand? This is the first. And what is culture? So let's start with the first. What is your definition of brand?
Right. Well, given all of the experts that you've talked to, Lucas, I'm sure that you've heard many different definitions of brand. And I think that's because, brand is a little bit hard to understand, but in the simplest, plainest way that I can say it, I define your brand as what you do and how you do it. And this definition, what you do and how you do it, is really grounded, I think, in the kind of standard business school definition of a brand, which says that your brand is the bundle of values and attributes that define the value you deliver to customers and the way that you do business. So basically, they're saying your brand is what you do and how you do it. And so I think that is probably a more comprehensive understanding of brand than simply an identity or a message or a positioning. But it really does, I think, capture what brand and what brand building is all about. And if you think about your brand as what you do and how you do it, then the tie to culture is really clear, because I define culture as the way that people in your organization behave and the attitudes and beliefs that inform those behaviors. And so your culture is very much how you do things. And so again, if your brand is what you do and how you do it, these 2 things are tightly related. They really are almost one and the same.
Okay, you said the culture is how you do it. When I think about the culture, I think about the behavior, how we behave,
Yes.
how we talk to each other, and so on. I don't know if you mean how you do it is the same.
Yes.
Okay, but what is the fusion between the brand and the culture? Because what I was always thinking was that the culture is a part of the brand, because brands behave in a certain way. So we can call this behavior culture. I don't know if you agree or not. But what is the fusion between brand and culture, and how to integrate these two?
Yes, yes. You're absolutely right, Lucas. I mean, your culture is a part of your brand. I think the reason why I talk about brand culture fusion is because most business people think about them as two different things. Most people think about your brand as an external identity, something that your customers and other external stakeholders perceive about you. And then they separately think about their culture as the internal way that they do things. And I think in the past, businesses had the luxury of building both brand and culture separately. They could create an identity or a desired identity that they promoted through their advertising and marketing, and then they would decide what kind of culture they wanted to have inside their company. And usually the brand building was delegated to the marketing department, and the culture was delegated to the human resource department. And so companies just kind of went and did these two things separately. But in today's business environment, companies cannot afford to have the disparity between the two. And actually, there's quite a bit of benefit by integrating and aligning them. And we can talk about the downsides and the upsides, but I think to answer your question about how you integrate and align them, the most important thing is to have one overarching purpose and a single set of core values that drive your brand and your culture. So you're not creating a brand essence or a brand purpose, and then over here you're creating a mission statement for your organization. These two things are one and the same. And then the core values, the principles that define how you behave, those need to apply not only to you as a brand externally, but also to you as an organization internally. So having that single overarching purpose and single set of core values is the first step to integrating and aligning brand and culture.
Okay. Is it difficult to build a culture? Or actually, where does it come from? Where to start? Because what I think is it's easier with a new company than with the older companies. I know many examples of companies that are 20, 30 years old here in Poland, the Polish market, but still do not have a developed culture. And it becomes difficult because you have to fight with kind of mentality, which is we've always did it this way. And it's very difficult to change what people think and what people get used to. And okay, let's go back to the question. Is it difficult to build a culture, and how we should start?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's hard work. And I think, my response to what you shared, Lucas, would be to say every organization has a culture. Whether or not it's the one that you want is really up to the leaders of the organization. So to your point, like some leaders have not spent any time and attention building their culture. And so you're right, like people they have ingrained behaviors, ingrained beliefs, and they're very disparate, different people in a different organization think different things and act in different ways. And so then you have this culture that is not focused, it's not effective, it's not healthy. So the leader's charge really is to identify what is our desired culture? How do we want people to behave? And then it's the leader's responsibility is to engage everyone in the organization to build that culture. Everyone from the board of directors down to your frontline employees all play a role in building your culture. But it's the leader that has to say, okay, this is where we're going. This is the kind of culture we want. And then allocating the resources and making it a priority. And then the leader themselves have to communicate and role model the desired culture. All of that needs to happen in order to build a culture. So, I always say that people think that culture is soft stuff. It's kind of, oh, nice to have, feel good, but to me, culture is hard stuff because it requires hard work and it also delivers hard results. Companies that have engaged workforces have higher sales, better customer outcomes, higher productivity, and less employee turnover. So it really makes sense for you to make the effort to build your culture. But the unfortunate fact is that a lot of business leaders don't make it a priority.
But what do you really mean by building culture? What are the elements of the culture? We've already said the behaviors. Of course, the North Star is the purpose.
Yeah.
We have the behaviors, the way we talk to each other, what we can say or we cannot, and what are the elements of the culture? Right.
So, and I think implied in your comment, Lucas, is that culture building doesn't just happen. You have to actually take steps to make it happen. So yes, you need to identify your purpose and values. And then as a leader, you need to talk about the culture, help people understand what it means, connect the dots between individual workers' day-to-day work and your purpose and values. And leaders need to role model it. But then in my book Fusion, I really lay out the steps to building the culture. And the number one step, or the first step, is to design your organization and to design your operational processes to build your culture. What I mean by this is just your organizational structure. Think about your organizational chart, where you have different functional heads heading up different groups and how many layers you have in the organization. Simply looking at that design and reconfiguring it to promote the kinds of behaviors that you want. Which groups need to collaborate, which groups need to be small enough so that they're agile, which groups need to report into the same person so that they are held accountable for the results. All of that is part of your organizational design. And then your processes, whether that is, kind of day-to-day processes like how you run meetings or how you track employee expenses or how you communicate with employees, those, day-to-day processes, as well as processes like product development, research, your sales process, your customer process, all of those, your budgeting and forecasting process, all of those also impact your culture. They send very powerful messages about what's important at your company. And so if you pay attention to your organizational design and your operational processes, you will be shaping your culture very dramatically. And then there are other steps. I talk in the book about creating employee experiences that build your culture. So just like your people who are listening to this show might be familiar with customer experience, the sum of everything a customer encounters in their connection to your brand. Employee experience is everything that an employee encounters in their connection with your company. And you need to design every step of that employee experience, every tool, every resource, every communication to reinforce your desired culture and to help your employees experience it and understand how important it is, and then buy into it and adopt it and embrace it. And then I talk about things like sweating the small stuff and engaging your employees with your brand. But it all starts with very fundamental steps of defining your purpose and values, leading culture from the top, and your operational processes and your organizational design.
So this employee experience, so something
yes.
inside affects the customer experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you think about it, employees really can only deliver experiences to customers that they have themselves. I always talk to folks about how, if you want a customer experience that is seamless and intuitive and tech enabled, but everything you do with your employees is on paper and it's slow and it's bureaucratic and clunky, your employees are not going to develop the desire nor the ability to actually deliver the kinds of customer experiences that you want to deliver. So you really need to integrate and align your employee experience and your customer experience, just like you're integrating and aligning your culture and your brand.
So when we are hiring new employees, we are not only we do not only want employees that have some skills, but we want employees who fits to our culture as well.
Absolutely, yes.
The taste of our culture at the very beginning. When we send the messages, we want a new we want new employees. They should fit our culture. So this is the first touch point.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many touch points during the recruiting process that are important, but you're absolutely right. When you are screening and interviewing your prospective employees, assessing culture fit is as important as skills and competence. And so, one of my favorite examples of a company that integrates and aligns brand and culture well is the company Airbnb. I don't know how big it is in Poland, but it's huge in the U.S. and it's overtaking traditional hospitality companies left and right. When a new employee interviews for a job at Airbnb, they actually go through 2 rounds of interviews specifically on culture and values alone. So certainly, they go through interviews to make sure that the person can do the job, but then they actually have a team of folks who will interview the person just based on their own values and trying to assess whether the individual's values align with the company values. And those people who are on that interviewing team have what we call like veto power. They can say, this person is not a fit. And the hiring manager can say, well, but they have all the skills and experiences I need. But in the end, the company's not going to hire them because, once you bring someone into your organization that doesn't fit with your culture, oftentimes that drags your whole organization down. I mean, small bit by bit, each employee, as I said, is responsible for culture building. And so each employee can either build it or detract from it.
It's the black sheep.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
We don't want them. Okay. Are there, or can you give any tips how to make employees and of course the leadership teams not only know the values and know our culture, but also believe in it and live it? Yes. Yeah. I know it's a big question and it's quite difficult, but maybe some basic ideas.
Right. Well, as I said, I think, one of the most important things is to help an employee understand how their day-to-day work, how that contributes to the purpose and how they can reflect the core values in their day-to-day work. And so that's a lot of what I think the leadership role is to connect the dots, to say, if we're Starbucks, we are nurturing the human spirit. Well, each barista who prepares a cup of coffee needs to see that when they hand that cup of coffee to their customer, they are not only giving coffee, but hopefully they are making that person feel good and to have this sense of community and belonging and hospitality. And so the leader is really responsible for that, so connecting the dots. But I would also say, that role modeling the culture is so important. I think a lot of times leaders think that all they need to do is talk, but really their actions are communicate far more than their words. And employees are always watching leaders to see, it can be little things, again, like how you run a meeting, how you greet someone, how you dress, it can be, things like, when do you send emails and expect responses, or how do you handle when employees have special needs, or, they need some sort of accommodation, whether it's family leave or just an emergency that comes up. All of these little things, employees are watching you. I always say that, just like little children, they pick up on everything that you do, good or bad. And so as a leader, you need to be very conscious of the kind of behaviors and attitudes that you're role modeling. And maybe the last thing I would say, and this probably, speaks to the communication, but I think people want to know not only the what, but the why. So why do we have this purpose? Why is it so important? Why are these core values so, like, what difference does it really make? And so you want to share all of the thinking and the rationale that has gone into the culture that you're building, so that people, you can't make people do anything, but if you can kind of cultivate their desire and inspire them and show them why what you're doing makes sense and the potential value that you're creating, then I think you get to people's hearts and really start convincing them that, no, this really is a great thing to be a part of. And then that's how you get employees on board with your culture.
So the culture is also about changing employees' perception of why they do what they do.
Yes.
So when they come to work, they have the different thinking about changing something, or what problems we solve, and not only they do not only think about the things they are going to do the whole day. Okay, we are going to call the clients the whole day.
Yes.
Okay, we are going to call the client because they want to change something in their lives.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are changing the perception why we do what we do.
Yes. A friend of mine told me about one time he toured a guitar factory. So it was a very famous guitar brand, and he went on a tour of their factory. And so he was talking to various employees, and he asked several employees who were assembling this particular part of the guitar, just kind of like part of the outside of the guitar. And he asked one person, what are you doing? And this person said, oh, I'm gluing this piece of wood to this piece of wood. And then he asked the next person, what are you doing? And this person said, well, I'm making sure that this guitar is going to sound good, because if these two pieces are glued together well, then the richness of the guitar sound comes through. And they asked a third person, what are you doing? And this person said, I'm enabling a musician to inspire and touch people. And it was that third person, I think, really understood that, hey, it's maybe very monotonous to be gluing these pieces of wood together and day after day, and it doesn't work, and there are problems, whatever. But he had his eye on the prize, on the vision, and that is what I think motivates people to do their best work, to go above and beyond what is expected of them. I don't know what the workforce trends are in Poland right now, but in the US, we're having a hard time with employees or employees quitting their jobs because they just don't find meaning and purpose, or are really being very selective about the companies they'll work for. And I think in that kind of environment where you have, what I call a war for talent, where you are competing for the best skilled workers for your company, you need to motivate and inspire people. And the best way to do that is to ensure that they understand what is the bigger picture. How are we helping customers? How are we actually changing the world?
So the same job, but actually the different story and a different perception. And I really wonder. I'm not sure. I don't know if there's any research on how the culture, or just living with the purpose, understanding why we do what we do beyond making money for the company, and how this affects engagement.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers on hand, but I know that the Gallup organization does quite a bit of work on employee engagement. And one of the, I think it's 12 factors that go into employee engagement is feeling a connection to the purpose and values of the organization. So, I think that there is research out there that does prove that connection. I just don't have the numbers with me.
Okay, but we can feel it, and we understand it. I think that when you go to work every day with this thought, today I'm going to glue this wood again and again and again, it's kind of a boring job, and
Right.
any job can be boring.
Yes. And so, that's not to minimize the mundane aspects of work life. I mean, we all have to do it. You and I have to deal with some things that are like, just, I can't believe, my printer broke. I need to fix my printer, but, I think that's why one of the chapters in my book, Fusion, talks about sweating the small stuff, creating rituals and procedures and creating artifacts that really reinforce what your desired culture is. So even in the way that you name a conference room, or the kind of prize you give to an employee who's met their sales quota, those little decisions about what you do there can make a big difference. And so if you are clear about what your culture is, then you can make those decisions to reinforce your culture with your employees.
All right. Do you have your books with you?
I do. Actually, here,
We can show
no,
them.
this way. Yeah. So I have What Great Brands Do, which was the first book I wrote.
First book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The 7 brand building principles that separate the best from the rest. And then my second book, Fusion, how integrating brand and culture powers the world's greatest companies.
Okay. So this is the new one.
Yeah. And in between, I wrote a book, an ebook called Extraordinary Experiences, where I researched retail and restaurant brands and talked about how they create extraordinary customer experiences. So it's an ebook, so I don't have a hard copy.
Okay. Of course. And can you answer in one sentence the question, which actually is the title of your first book? What do great brands do and bad brands do not? In one sentence.
In one sentence. Great brands think about and use their brands differently. This goes back to what we started out at the very beginning. Great brands don't think about their brands as a message or an image. They think about everything that they do needs to reflect the core of the brand.
Okay. Wonderful. Denise, it was amazing to talk to you. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and inspiration with Polish entrepreneurs, marketers, and students as well. And if you can tell us where we can follow you.
Yeah. Well, go to my website, deniseleeyohn.com. So it's all one word. And that's really kind of a portal it has my social media links. I'm primarily on LinkedIn and Twitter. And then it also has free chapters from my books and other free resources, lots of articles and blog posts and newsletters that I've written. So deniseleeyohn.com.
So if you want to know more about culture and brands, visit deniseleeyohn.com. Denise, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed our conversation.